Today, we have the great privilege to welcome to Uruguay one of the world's leading voices in positive psychology and the science of happiness, Dr. Tal Ben Shahar, the professor behind the two most popular courses ever attended in Harvard history. Tal is the author of international bestsellers that have inspired millions of readers around the globe. His work combines rigorous scientific research with practical tools that help us cultivate well-being, resilience, and meaning in our everyday lives. Welcome, Tal. It's an honor to have you with us today as part of the Mentes Expertas Tour. Thank you for being here with us in Uruguay. You've inspired thousands around the world, and today our audience in Spain and Latin America is eager to dive into your ideas on happiness and human flourishing.
What an honor it is to be here with Mentes Expertas and to be sharing what I care about so much with audiences in Spain and Latin America. Thank you for having me.
Given the present international context of global uncertainty, emotional fatigue, and search for meaning, your happiness perception revolution speaks directly to our needs and is more relevant than ever. Your book, Happier, came out in 2007, but still feels ahead of its time. You're optimistic about the possibility to change toward a more emotionally prosperous society. Would you like to explain us what does it imply and how we could get there? And also, what do you believe is the core insight that makes it so enduring in today's post-pandemic and turbulent world?
You know, when I wrote Happier back in 2007, I must say that I never imagined it would still feel so relevant today. But in many ways, the questions it asks are timeless. Questions such as, how do we find meaning? How do we create joy that lasts beyond fleeting pleasures? What gives life purpose? If anything, after the pandemic and in this uncertain world, people are even hungrier for these conversations. So my optimism comes from a simple truth I've seen again and again. And that is that happiness is not a luxury. It's something we can cultivate in ourselves and in our communities through small daily practices. And when we do, it spreads. It's contagious. That's why I still believe in the possibility of an emotionally prosperous society.
You describe happiness as the ultimate currency, a way to evaluate life's experiences beyond money or fame. Could you explain what it means and how it can reshape personal and professional life priorities today?
When I say happiness is the ultimate currency, I mean that it is the highest on the hierarchy of goals, the end towards which all other goals lead. Everything else, whether it's money or fame or success, are just means. The real bottom line is, do I live a meaningful, fulfilling, joyful life? When people in organizations adopt happiness as the currency by which they measure success, their priorities shift. You begin to ask, will this project energize me? Will this job give me purpose? Will this relationship nourish me? Now, it's not about ignoring money or status or success, but about placing them in service of what truly matters, which is happiness.
When it comes to applied happiness, one of your most practical contributions to find our calling that also help us to make important decisions in different areas of our lives is the MPS process, meaning, pleasure, and strength. Could you tell us how do they interact to boost our long-term happiness?
Yeah, the MPS framework is one of my favorite tools. It prompts us to ask 3 questions. What gives me meaning? That's the M. What provides me with pleasure? The P. What are my strengths? The S. The goal is then to find the overlap among the 3 answers. When you pursue activities that give you meaning, that bring you pleasure, and that use your strengths, you're more likely to experience lasting happiness. Sometimes people chase only one of these, say pleasure, and then wonder why life feels empty. Or they focus on meaning, but without joy, it feels heavy. The magic is in the integration. When you work, your relationships, or your hobbies tick all three boxes, you have found your calling.
In being happy, you explore powerful insights about emotional acceptance, relationships, and particularly that true happiness comes not from avoiding pain, but from embracing the full human experience, considering pleasure, meaning, failure, and growth. Looking back, which of these insights do you believe people struggle with the most today, and how can they begin to shift that in their everyday lives?
One of the hardest lessons for people to embrace is that happiness doesn't mean the absence of pain. Quite the opposite, in fact. Real happiness begins when we give ourselves what I call the permission to be human. That means allowing space for sadness, fear, envy, and other painful emotions. Today, I think people struggle most with this idea of emotional acceptance. Why? Because we live in a culture that tells us to stay positive or move on. But suppressing emotions only makes them stronger. Healing starts with acceptance. And when we embrace the full spectrum of emotions, we actually open ourselves up to deeper joy and growth. In other words, the first step to happiness is allowing in unhappiness.
Your SPIRE model, that is spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional, proposes a multidimensional approach for flourishing. In what ways can individuals and organizations use SPIRE to guide their well-being strategies?
SPIRE stands for spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional well-being. It's my way of saying that happiness touches every part of who we are. For individuals, this might mean journaling for spiritual well-being, exercising for physical health, learning something new for intellectual growth, prioritizing friendships for relational health, and practicing gratitude for emotional well-being. For organizations, SPIRE can be a strategy. Imagine a workplace where purpose is clear, that's spiritual well-being. Balance is encouraged, that's physical well-being. Learning is valued, that's intellectual well-being. Relationships are authentic and safe, that's of course relational well-being. And finally, emotions are taken seriously, which leads to emotional well-being. Now, that's not just good for people, it's good for business too.
Your vision of a happiness studies discipline gave birth to accredited graduate programs in happiness studies, including the recent launch of a PhD in the field. What inspired this academic initiative, and how do you see it contributing to global well-being?
Launching graduate programs in happiness studies, including the first PhD, was about taking happiness seriously as an academic discipline. We study history, economics, biology, geography. Why not happiness? The thing that we all ultimately want. So my vision is to equip leaders, educators, parents, coaches, as well as organizations with the knowledge and tools to help people flourish. And the field is interdisciplinary. We bring together psychology, philosophy, literature, neuroscience, even spirituality. The goal is simple but ambitious: to contribute to a global happiness revolution.
You know, in Latin America and especially in Uruguay, we see growing interest in mental health, emotional education, and well-being. How can your teachings be most helpful to individuals, schools, and organizations here?
I've always admired the warmth and vitality of Latin American cultures. There is already such a strong emphasis on community and relationships, which is one of the foundations of well-being. the key now is not to lose this foundation, not to replace real relationships with virtual ones, or substitute authentic social interactions with social media. In addition, I hope that my teachings can provide both individuals and organizations in Uruguay with frameworks like SPIRE or the MPS process, frameworks that can help structure and amplify what's already there. Whether in schools, in workplaces, or in families, the message is the same. Happiness is a science that can be taught and can be learned.
Tal, if you could offer one micro practice today, something our audience in Uruguay can start right now for elevating their happiness, what would it be?
Allow me to offer 3 practices. First, spend quality time with family and friends, disconnected from technology. Second, engage in physical exercise regularly, which will contribute to both physical and mental health. Third, gratitude. Every night, before you go to sleep, write down 3 things, at least, you're grateful for. They don't have to be big. Sometimes it's a smile from a stranger, or a taste of good coffee that you're grateful for, or a precious moment of laughter with a friend. This simple habit changes the way we see the world. We start noticing the good that's already present. Over time, it quite literally rewires our brain towards positivity and resilience.
Tal, in your upcoming talk here in Uruguay, what can participants expect to take away with them?
Well, I'll be talking about the science of happiness, but even more, the practice of happiness. People will walk away not just with ideas, but with tools. How to find more meaning in everyday life, how to cultivate resilience in hard times, how to deal with stress, and how to strengthen relationships. My hope is that everyone leaves the room with both inspiration as well as with practical steps they can begin to take right away. Because happiness isn't only to be studied, it's to be lived.
Thank you so much, Tal. It's been a joy and a privilege. On behalf of Mentes Expertas and myself, we are deeply grateful for taking the time to share your insights with us.
Thank you once again for this wonderful opportunity.